today to have our first AMA with LB as for this year. Um, and Stick around for the end. We're going to share with you how to actually get one-on-one delivery, email delivery audit with LB on whatever platform you're sending on. So stick around. It's going to be super exciting. We have a ton of questions for you. I'm Joshua, the COO of SendWorks, Sendex, and SendPost products. We are a enterprise email platform used by publishers who understand how email delivery issues tie into sponsorship revenue at scale. And it's my pleasure and honor to introduce LB Blair for tonight's AMA. LB is a full stack email solutions architect, strategic advisor for us, with a career spanning billions of successfully delivered emails across high volume enterprise environments. She has worked with some of the top newsletters that you would recognize by name. And she may talk about some of those experiences today. She works across every technical layer of email, authentication, MTAs, APIs, deliverability infrastructure, compliance, and so forth, and is known for a forensic level diagnosis that uncovers root causes that most teams don't even know are killing their delivery and their revenue. So it is a great honor for me today to introduce LB Blair. Welcome, LB.
Thank you, Joshua. Yeah, setting the bar really high, man. But super excited to be here. And honestly, everybody hit me with the hardest questions you can come up with. Email is changing all the time, and it's if you want to be the best, you got to stay sharp. So, really mixing it up and looking at the data and diving deep on these situations, even down to a forensic level, absolutely is necessary in some cases.
So I am posting a link to submit your anonymous questions where, try to stump us here. Like if you have any email delivery question, ask it. And I've got a bunch of questions ready for you, LB, while we're waiting for the new ones to come in. All right, so our first question, here we go. So, again, these are all anonymous, so you won't lose your job for asking. How often should I be checking my inbox placement and delivery metrics? Is it something I look at every send or only when the numbers start to dip?
That's a really good question. To be very honest, I think the answer to that is how important is email to your revenue? So since I know a lot of folks here run newsletters, or if you're in the e-commerce space, if that's your source of revenue, I'd be checking it every send. I typically like to wait about 24 hours after each send, because that frankly gives all of the email to do the majority of what it's going to do. I'll say I'd always heard the standard logic being like, an email is going to do the majority of its, opens, clicks, conversions within the first 5 hours. I don't actually think that's true anymore, especially, not in the age of Apple Mail privacy protection. And while those opens are not real opens, or at least we can't ever know, I kind of jokingly call them Schrodinger's opens, because once the Apple Mail privacy open fires, you never know if the individual, opened that message or not. But what I can tell you is if you're not getting Apple Mail privacy opens, you're definitely landing in spam there. And those can be very important signals, because if some people don't know, Apple relies on Proofpoint. Run into an issue before with a sender where we were able to basically, catch the thread because the founder's emails to his iCloud were bouncing due to security reasons, and then we traced the thread to Proofpoint. Ultimately, that one we ended up tracing it all the way to a website compromise that was due to a vendor plugin supply chain attack, basically.
Amazing. Yeah. We're getting a ton of questions coming in. So ready for the next one, LB?
Yeah, hit me.
All
Let
right.
me finish that one up right quick. Sorry, I would
Please,
check.
please.
So when I worked for the e-commerce conglomerate for Tide Lopez, and we were sending a billion emails a month, I check those reports every day. We check every single day. And honestly, having a variety of, for those of you that maybe run multiple newsletters, that is such a unique opportunity because you're always trying to answer the question, okay, is it me? Is it the mailbox provider? Is it, just something going on? Because sometimes on new days where there's a lot of crazy stuff going on in the news, we've had a few of those recently, sometimes people step away from their inboxes. And maybe that might influence your decision to send or not if you are sending multiple drops a day or if you haven't launched yet. But what I would say is if email's important to you, I check about 24 hours after every send, to be very honest.
Mm.
And you want to be able to go, okay, is it the content? Maybe compare it to your last one. Depending on your volume, your send volume, you may not want to inbox placement test every single email. But if you have, a list of 5 or 10,000 people or more, I don't think it's out of the question to inbox placement test every single send. And that way you can kind of control for content variables and figure out if that's what the issue is. Because say, if you introduce a problem in the content that's landing you in spam, you want to find that and correct that as soon as possible. You don't want to let that fester and devolve into a general domain or IP. And or why would I say or why have one problem in deliverability when it could be multiple, right? Why you don't want to let that, you don't want to let a little content issue, a little blip on the radar become something that's cemented in the spam filters AI.
You've been mentioning this recently, that with the AI being brought into spam filtering, the grace period, the recoverability of this is getting a lot harder. Would you mind speaking to that just a little bit? What are you seeing with filters?
So I'll say the AI's already been in there for a long time. Spam
Yeah.
filtering, has heavily relied on machine learning algorithms for a long time. That being said, they've advanced greatly since 2017 and that Google paper, Attention is All You Need. And due to that, these spam filters become like subject to what's called confirmation bias. And the spam filter, basically what that means is if Google starts putting your mail in spam and then users don't rescue that mail from the spam folder or engage with it in any meaningful way, they become increasingly convinced that that's where your mail belongs, and they send more and more of it to live there. Until that may even progress into bounces, rejections, etc. So I think that's why it's super important to catch. It is more important than ever to catch deliverability issues quickly and remediate them, which you don't want to make knee-jerk reactions. Sometimes you might just have an off day. If you're in
Mhm.
e-commerce, maybe the offer just, didn't resonate with people. But if you have a trend of, poor inbox placement at a mailbox provider or as a whole, for a couple, 3 days, it's time to start looking at some kind of intervention. Um,
Mhm. Mhm. And for our audience today, publishers, newsletters, a lot of newsletters are sending on a daily basis to very large volume. Even more so to check every day and make sure you're not letting things spiral out of control.
yeah,
Cool. Um, we have a question from well, it's anonymous, so I won't say.
let's
Um,
go.
we have a new question. I clean my list regularly, but I'm never sure if I'm cutting too aggressively or not enough. How do I know when a subscriber is actually not interested versus just not now?
I'll say this. I kind of come from the you can pry that email from my cold dead fingers school of emailers. I think acquisition is incredibly expensive. And due to that, I kind of am loath to ever consider an email address dead. But what I would say is it's always smart to throttle the frequency with which you email folks. Um, to match the rate at which they're engaging.
Mm.
So for example, I think this is why, if you run a newsletter, it's important to maybe have a weekly digest that's maybe your top article from each weekly newsletter plus a couple of new ones, maybe if you send Monday through Friday, right? And give people, the option. I think it's important, I would say after 30 days or so, if somebody hasn't opened or clicked or engaged at all,
Hmm.
I would probably route them for re-engagement. I'd probably send them an email that reminds them, hey, we've been sending you emails because you signed up, and if you can personalize the date, I think the more context you can provide, the better. Restate
Hmm.
kind of your value proposition, but I'd make it a really simple, lightweight email, kind of what I like to call a combo breaker, something that's going to be substantially different than what you've been sending, and route them for some kind of re-engagement and give them maybe the opportunity to downgrade their subscription from weekly to daily if they're not wanting to receive daily emails. But that would be, I think in about a month. When I actually ran an experiment, this was in e-commerce, but we basically found that, the majority of opens, clicks, and also conversions and revenue dollars that we made came from the segment of people. And I mean, it was over 95% came from folks that had opened, clicked, or signed up in the last 30 days.
Hmm. Relevancy bias, relevance there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd say at
Um,
about the 30-day mark, yeah, you
yeah.
want to route them for that re-engagement, hit them with a
Hmm.
combo breaker email that's substantially different,
Hmm.
and it again, if you have that option to maybe let them downgrade to just weekly and choose their preference, that's
Yeah.
the direction I'd probably head. I'd say is, as far as list cleaning like aggressively, what I'll tell you is, it's
Hmm.
generally, I always set mine up in somewhat of an automated fashion. Like if you're talking about literally running your list through, some kind of validation or even hygiene tool, that's really only necessary when you collect the address. If you continue to send to the addresses regularly, because the very best intelligence you'll get comes
Hmm.
from your ESP, from doing an actual live send. Because there's all
Mm.
of like Yahoo and AOL out there that really don't allow for validations. They don't want you to try to run validations against their network. Google, on the other hand, takes the opposite stance. They're incredibly permissive when it comes to validation. And I think they probably think it reduces the amount of, incoming mail traffic that they have to deal with if folks are allowed to just ping a validation and not send the actual mail packets. So, and that's, part of the nuance. Mailbox providers take very different stances on these things. And having an ESP partner that is well versed in that and has designed their product to account for that is
Mhm.
crucial. So that's what I would say is, a good ESP, once you have hygiened an address on intake and then continue to send to it regularly, at least once every 30 days, you shouldn't need to reprocess that address for hygiene. But in terms of, like you said, the relevance of do I want to continue sending to this person, that's more of a honestly business decision and honestly up to what your reputation supports. I always send as aggressively as my reputation will support. If I can maintain a high reputation at Gmail sending to my last 365 days engaged, you can bet your buttons that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to start trying to push that limit to 390, 420, 450, push the limit. I treat email like a race car, and you're trying to win the
Mm.
race. You're trying to drive that sucker as fast as possible without crashing out.
Mhm. I've got a bit of a technical question here for you.
Oh, hit me. Love
Um,
those.
all right, cool. What's your take on multiple URL redirects? For example, ESP to advertiser to a final destination. Many advertisers provide redirect domains to track performance, but does that carry risk for deliverability with it?
Absolutely. So I mean, it's entirely going to depend on the reputation of that link domain. I highly recommend the Spam House actually has a reputation tool where you can check deliverability. You can check your domain reputation at Spam House. They actually give you several different dimensions. Like, are you, do they think you're trying identity? Do they think you're properly identifying yourself as a sender, or do they think you're trying to, obfuscate your identity?
Mhm.
They have a infrastructure score. Do they think the infrastructure you're hosting your website, your DNS, where you registered your domain, all of that, and where you're sending your email from. Do they think it's reputable, or do they think maybe there's some problems? SMTP score. What do they think of your behavior in the SMTP channel? And also, there's a human element where that's why Spamhaus is the most trusted block list and honestly, domain intelligence service in the world. Is they actually human curate a lot of their listings, which means they have a very low degree of false positives. It's not zero, but in general, if Spamhaus lists someone, I generally assume it's for a good reason.
Okay. How I wish I had a follow up for that, but it's
No,
beyond my. How important is it having a consistent send time, such as within a 30-minute range every day for an editorial newsletter?
I guess I might miss some of the nuance of what we mean by like an editorial newsletter versus, I guess, maybe other different types. I guess where you're like sharing probably more opinion, and I guess where you're editorializing. I don't know. Would we consider maybe 1440 or Morning Brew editorial? I'm not entirely sure, but I guess what I would say is what's going to be most important is the expectations you've set with your subscribers on sign up. I think that's actually super important as a newsletter. Is on that opt-in page, you want to have a blurb that tells them what to expect after signing up. You should receive an email and then have like, the information of, hey, we send every day at 8 a.m. You should receive this message by 8:30 every day, Monday through Friday, Monday through, Sunday through Saturday, whatever the cadence is, right? And make sure you're setting that expectation really clear, and then send a confirmation email with that exact same info in it. Like, just make sure you're really setting that expectation and reinforcing it. So what I'll say is, if you set the expectation that email is going to be there by 8 a.m. every day, and you substantially miss that deadline by 30 minutes or an hour, I mean, your viewership is probably going to go down because people may have a routine. They get up, they, take their shower, their exercise, and then they're reading, the newsletter while they're drinking their coffee and having some breakfast. So if it's not there during the window that they've allocated for it based on the expectations you set with them when they signed up and what you've maintained day over day over day, I mean, yeah, I think it's reasonable to assume your viewership, your readership will probably suffer for that message. So I do think for newsletters, consistency is way more important than it is for like an e-commerce or something like that. If it's not something with a consistent schedule, I think the relevance of the content and just knowing your audience is going to be way more important. Like if you have an editorial newsletter where you send whenever there's breaking news, it's probably much more important that you have a track record of really hitting that trend so that people, when they've moved you to the primary tab because they don't want to miss those notifications, or if Google's decided that that's where in general people want you and they put you there, you need enough people checking those notifications when they come through their phones, because that's the big difference between the primary tab and every other tab at Google and all these other services. Is it going to ding a notification on the phone? Yes, no. And is it going to be in the primary tab on the desktop, front and center, or is it going to be tucked away in one of the other tabs? Which is not a death sentence, but it means people have to go searching for it versus it like being right in their face. So that's part of why I do think, yeah, hitting a pretty consistent time there can be important, but otherwise, it's going to be a lot more contextual about the content and the like relationship that you've established with your readers. For example, if you have a reputation of issuing like breaking news, and then you start sending a bunch of, junk that maybe people don't want to get primary tab alerts about, and they move you to the promo, that's, the reputation's degraded, and then your readership is probably going to suffer.
It sounds like it's about trust, right? If you say you're going to send at 8, send at 8. If you say you're going to talk about breaking news, talk about breaking news. Keep your word. Be transparent.
Absolutely. Set expectations and reinforce expectations.
It also reminds me a lot back in the day when we'd get the Sunday Times, and if the funnies didn't come by 8, no
Yeah,
way.
I remember that.
Thank you. At a high level, do you see any differences in deliverability depending on which growth channels the publisher uses? Example, meta ads versus co-registration, etc.
Yeah, so actually this is probably one of my favorite topics in that you should always be looking, the same way you look at your email metrics by mailbox provider to assess if you have a problem at Google or Yahoo or Hotmail or Apple, iCloud, whatever, right? The same way you're looking at that, you should always look at your email performance by lead source. Because
Mm,
certainly, across a number of clients, not specific just to newsletters, I've seen issues with Facebook and Meta, producing some kind of a high degree of unmailable addresses, like just low quality um, addresses and just, a fair amount of garbage. And co-registrations can be the same. I don't think it's one. What I will say is, I don't know if there's exactly a ranking of collection methods.
mhm,
Obviously, like organic, pay-per-click, that's probably the gold standard. And granted, I would say Meta, Facebook is like pay-per-click also, but I don't think I've seen an instance of that lead source. I haven't had to put an email hygiene checker in between that and my ESP before. And co-registration, what I'll say is that is where you will see the performance vary the most wildly.
mm,
If they are only pushing people that are relevant to you, then it should be great. It can be better. It can be one of your best sources.
mhm,
But if they're, just trying to push anyone they can to get whatever it is they charge you per recipient, from you, may not be great. Those people may be very loosely affiliated. They might
mhm,
not be super aware of the expectations on like opt-in or whatever. So
mhm,
I think that's, I think it's so important to audit those lead sources because I promise you they are not all created equal. And like
mhm,
it's a resource game at some level, right? Your budget for your ad spend or your co-registrations or whatever is the
mhm,
resource. And then um the ESP results and how those people are actually engaging are the truth. So I would always pass the lead source into my ESP or BI platform and be able to build reports about email performance by lead source, because then you can identify the ones that are underperforming and cut
mm,
those and reinvest that in the ones that are performing the best, especially in situations where there's maybe a complaint problem, like you're getting complaints and you don't know why.
mhm,
I've often seen it vary wildly by lead sources, and I have kind of a matrix of, there are people that are maybe, and this probably makes more sense in e-commerce where, there's a financial, you're making money, based on what they buy. But, I tell
mhm,
people they'll be like high, there are folks that are low risk, high reward, right? They've got great positive metrics. They've got great purchase metrics. You might have some people, the most challenging category is the high risk, high reward folks. And you may have to like throttle those. But,
mhm,
when you find somebody that's a high risk, low reward, low engagement with your newsletter, that's an easy, lots of them are unsubscribing, complaining, or just
mhm,
not opening and clicking. That's a super easy. Cut that source and reinvest it elsewhere.
mm.
Always audit your
Fair,
vendors.
fair. Yeah. I said we'd wait to the end before we introduce LB's audits on your email
Oh,
delivery, but I don't want to wait to the end. So
yeah, no, that's fine.
if you guys out there, if you like what you're hearing, if you think LB could help you, we are offering 10 spots. So this is the link to apply. And we're offering 10 spots. LB will take a look at your ESP, your delivery metrics, and I'm pretty sure that she'll be able to find at least 3 ways to improve your readership, your inboxing, or your deliverability rates. So
Absolutely.
thank
Yeah,
you
we're
for
going to
that.
look at I'm happy to do it. I love getting in there and mixing it up and seeing what, all the different use cases are. I feel like I learn so much when I talk to people about how they're trying to use email and honestly even the niche things that they might be talking about in their newsletters. I think I love honestly one of my favorite things is tell me about your job, tell me about what you do. I think that's super cool. So I'd love to get to know some more of you. And yeah, we're going to look at your ESP metrics. We'll look at the authentication configurations. We'll pop off an inbox test. Like we're going to be, we're going to do as much as we can inside of like an hour to give you actionable tips. The big thing I'm seeing these days, a lot of people getting tripped up by content. There's a lot of little T's that need to be crossed, I's that need to be dotted, and you will be astounded what some of those little technical content configuration corrections, you'll be astounded about how much that can improve your inbox placement really relatively quickly if certain areas are being failed. We can help you. I do DNS work. That's how I got my start in deliverability consulting. So if you need help setting up like custom authentication, DMARC, BIMI, whatever, like we will hop on and I will walk you right through it. Whatever it is your program needs to be more successful with email the very next day, that's what we're going to do.
Awesome. That'll be very generous offer. Anybody watching this, take us up on it. It doesn't come cheaply.
Not often.
Or often. So like this is world-class enterprise email deliverability consulting. So check it out. I have a few questions with votes. So I'm going to prioritize those next, LB.
Let's go.
From Alicia, I send one big broadcast a week to my whole list. Would splitting it up or sending to my most engaged readers first actually change where it lands?
Yes. Yeah. Because here's the thing, if you have a newsletter, right, let's say you're producing basically somewhat novel content every time, even though maybe the, header, footer, the basic structure is all the same, but if you're producing different content, if you don't have a specific time expectation set that, you'd be violating for sure, I would, maybe send all of your your last 30-day engagers. I might send all of those people and then wait like an hour and then send or two and then send the rest of everyone else because that's going to help you get set up with a positive content reputation. And that's going to help inbox subsequent emails. And I've just kind of seen that, Google and a lot of the mailbox providers try to really look at those leading indicators. Something a lot of people don't know is mailbox providers will actually, move email to spam retroactively if they see the first few people that open it, especially people who are considered like power users. A lot of people aren't aware, not every user, especially at Google and also at Microsoft with their SRD panel, they have a much more formal system of it. Google has a kind of more invisible and like silent system. But what I've heard is, effectively not every user's action in the inbox has the same weight. People who are frequent mailbox checkers, they're in that Gmail inbox every single day and they're, reading emails, moving emails to spam, moving emails out of spam, they're highly engaged with their Gmail box. Those people their actions have a much bigger weight. So if you can hit a bunch of those people that are maybe some of your most engaged readers, and then and then you send that second the second tranche of emails, that's really going to set that up for success. Whereas, it's really the spam filters are risk management systems, right? And it's less risky to make more smaller decisions than singular large decisions. I always kind of tell people, if you have a 50,000 person, in like e-commerce or, something that's not news related, not time sensitive, I always tell people, if you could send Monday through Friday and you have a 50,000 person list, you will probably get a lot more opens sending, 10,000 a day than sending all 50,000 at once. Because you're probably going to get more inbox placement that way. It depends. It depends on your reputation, the capacity you've established. But for sure, if you only send weekly, even doing same day and just like leaving in a couple of hours. And this also can be, come with kind of is split testing as well, right?
Mhm.
Like you split test your campaign and then 2 hours later you send the version that did the best. But if you do that and kind of front load all of your most engaged people first, like, yeah, you're going to put up really good engagement numbers and that's going to create a kind of positive reputation association.
Very interesting. And I did not know that about the Gmail Power User Rankings. That's amazing insight.
Yeah, Microsoft has a formal program called SRD. I don't remember what the acronym stands for. I know a few people that are in it, but basically they were Hotmail power users that like got an invite. And then Microsoft will occasionally ping them and be like, "Hey, what do you think of this email?"
Amazing.
And those and
Wow.
their evaluation has a huge impact on senders.
Um, Bit of a nerdy question for you, speaking of Google. And while I do that, I'm going to pop that link on. I hope this works. Haha,
Oh, hey, there we go.
it worked. Okay. If you guys want to talk to LB about your business and your sending, this is where to go to get that. I have a question for you about Google Postmaster tools. Oh, where'd it go? It just disappeared.
Oh, maybe it's a temporary thing.
Yeah, it's like 10 seconds.
That's okay. We'll flash it. We'll flash it a few times.
Um, Google Postmaster tools. Is there anything that isn't shown in tools like Google Postmaster tools or SNDS that you've found really matters?
Yeah, content evaluation. Content,
Mm,
how they evaluate the content. That I don't typically see in there. So like Postmaster tools for sure, they have like a TLS dashboard that says, is your SMTP connection into Google TLS encrypted and is it at a sufficient level, right? TLS 1.1, no good, no more. It's got to be 1.2 or above, and frankly, most folks are on 1.3. So they evaluate that, but what they don't evaluate is that I've basically found they have that same expectation of all the links in your emails.
mm,
So if your email links are not HTTP secure, I actually dealt with this recently. An ESP where a sender had set things up. They actually delegated their DNS, which I never do. We don't do that at SendWorks. We keep you in control of your DNS. We just make it as easy as possible for you to get those records and deploy them. And we have
mhm,
support standing by if you have any questions about doing that. Um, and we're also working on ways to make it even easier with like integrations. But what I'll say is, um, yeah, they don't show that they expect your links in the emails to also be HTTPS. And I found they expect your images to have alt text. And I would say the bigger the image file size is, the more text you need to have to kind of balance out that image to HTML code ratio. And also, whether or not the emails are, compressed. And over at
mm,
SendWorks, we losslessly compress all the images that are hosted on our platform to make them as lightweight as possible because load time is important. It's super important for your SEO, like how quickly your website loads and how performant it is. I think a lot of people don't realize that's also true with email. I mean, because
mm,
also, if you think about it, if you put a big image up at the top of the email and it loads really slow, how long are folks' attention spans in the age of TikTok? They're very short.
yeah.
So if that image doesn't load and people effectively bounce out of the email, I know in SEO there's the concept of a page bounce, which I think
Mhm,
where somebody comes to your website, they get referred to it and then they spend less than half a second there.
mhm,
That's considered a bounce. I would be astounded if Google doesn't track that, the number of people that like wait for an image to load and get bored and bounce back out. So I
mm,
think the last bastion that maybe Google doesn't have a lot of, kind of openly available reporting, assuming well, I say openly available, but I mean like you have to authenticate to get it. But, effectively, I don't think they have a lot of reporting on the content. The most you might get is in the
mhm,
delivery errors dashboard. It'll say
mhm.
spammy content,
Yeah.
but that's generally not talking about content technical construction. That's, I mean, honestly, probably a symptom of, maybe they see a link or something they don't like in there. There's a link to a domain they maybe don't love.
Mhm. Great. Um, this question has a bunch of votes here. So, what actually trips the spam filters these days? What do newsletters often end up doing unintentionally that hurts inbox placement?
Mm, mm.
Good question.
That is that's a tough one because I think one of the struggles for newsletters is that they are often under tight production deadlines.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and I think that in a lot of cases, like image sizes, maybe things get borrowed from web assets. And those are unfortunately not great to send an email, like, because there are just an image created for the web is entirely different than an image or design created for email. Like, there's just way
Hmm.
different considerations. And most things for the web are going to be, people have huge monitors these days. You need it to scale almost endlessly. For email, it's much more of a fixed viewport,
Mm.
and you don't want it to be so heavy. So I think content for sure. The one thing I would say too, depending on what industry you're talking about with your newsletter, some subjects, if you're talking about, I don't know, if you're an OnlyFans newsletter talking about the business of being a creator on OnlyFans, um, that might be kind of challenging. For sure. There's probably you'll learn experientially, and this is where I think inbox placement testing and monitoring is hugely important to
Mm.
basically see how does your inbox placement vary based on what you're talking about and how you
Mhm.
can talk about it. I know like folks on TikTok these days, they'll complain about the algorithm and then they'll kind of sideways reference certain things. They won't say it. They'll maybe write it on a board or something. An email came up with that ages ago. That's why, you get that advice of, don't send an all image email because that became a tactic to get around keyword filtering. Now,
Yep.
keyword filtering is not as much of a thing these days as it's more about content fingerprinting, like cryptographic hashes of the whole piece of content or singular elements like, you know, the footer of the email and that physical business address you're required to put in there.
Mhm.
Um, but I think that, honestly, the number one thing I often just see tripping up newsletters is not trimming up the subscriber list based on
Mm.
their actual engagement,
Mm.
continuing to send to people after it's no longer likely they're going to re-engage. That's kind of the number one thing. I would say, in content, the other things that I've seen, like I said, oversized images, lack of alt text, insecure links.
Mhm.
Honestly, another big one is if you're maybe linking people to other news sites or to offer sites, if
Mhm.
any of those offers don't, have an untrusted domain or an
Mm.
insecure element, for sure that could be a problem. Broken relay, if you include a an ad in there that or a sponsor offer in there that hits a relay and that's broken links are a big problem, because that has
Mm.
also putting broken links in emails was once a tactic to evade the spam filter because you'd say, oh, I really want to be a militia. I really, LB will put her black hat on for a second and say, well, I really want to hack a bunch of people and I have an email list I'm going to send to it and I'm going to but if I put a link on there that's obviously filled with malware, they're going to figure that out. So I'll just send it with, I'll send it with the link broken, no content on it, and then I'll put the content live. Well, now that's just a spam signal, and I think that's a super important thing. Anything that is too much like a tactic to evade the spam filter will eventually be discovered and punished with extreme prejudice. I've seen some kind of nonsense these days of like all these little tools out there that say they'll get you in the primary tab. Well, I looked under the hood at a couple of them, and what they do is they put a bunch of breach notification, like cybersecurity alert language, account notification alert language in a hidden comment field. And I think if I can identify it with my eyeballs relatively quickly, I have confidence Google's a whole lot smarter. The sum total of Google and their spam filtering team is a lot smarter than 1LB.
Fair enough. Um, so that kind of leads into this next question, which is around warm up, from Alicia again. I ran a paid ad campaign, added 20K subscribers in a few weeks. Cool. Um, here's the question: if mailbox providers see a spike like that, does that hurt my deliverability? And how do I onboard these new people without taking that inbox placement that she's worked so hard to build?
Oh, that is a great question. I'll be
Yeah.
really honest. I've had to tell people to throttle their ad spend before. I've
Mm,
had to tell people to throttle their ad spend because basically you almost need to warm up your ad spend for email address acquisition the
mm,
same way you do like a ramp up. Because basically, Google and all these mailbox providers, they have a ton of
mhm,
data points on, hey, this is the first time I've seen this domain. Here's
mhm,
what an organic growth pattern looks like. So if you start to exhibit an inorganic growth pattern, that's going to be a problem. Now, how much of a problem depends on how those subscribers behave. If it might be fine. You add
mhm.
all those people, and if a sufficient number of them go into the spam folder and pull your message out and move it into the inbox, into the primary tab somewhere, you might be completely fine. But I would certainly say that's absolutely a great question because this is some key newsletters have to plan for. Let's say today you're sending 20,000 emails, and then in a week you acquire 20,000 more. That's a
Yeah.
very
You've
challenging
doubled.
growth pattern. That's a
Yeah.
challenging growth pattern because the other thing is the spam filter is thinking of it like other times they've seen things like that were malicious. So, for example, I've had clients. I end up somehow when you deal with this once, you end up becoming the person people go to. But I've helped a lot of people recover after like a cybersecurity attack that impacted email reputation. I had a
Mhm.
sender whose website got hacked, and they had a WordPress plugin that allowed sends, fully authenticated sends from the parent domain on, and
Ooh.
this wasn't even anything they really used. I think it was maybe used for like confirmation emails, but a
Yeah.
malicious actor got into their web host and sent to like a 70,000 person list when
Mm,
those
mm,
people normally only sent to maybe 20 or 30,000 people on their biggest day. It was not a very large
mhm.
sender. And that spike in volume, I mean, it was malicious. It was the malicious actor added a whole new list of people to send these awful, like, the FBI is looking for you, you better call us, like,
Yeah.
emails. And so if there's a huge spike in volume, that instantly, like I said, spam filters are risk management, and spikes on the graph signal risk. A volume spike is a spike on the graph. So it's something that I've seen it be okay. There was a situation where I helped a certain mouse-eared streaming service get off the ground, especially with the passcode reset emails, and that
Mhm.
actually was able to do just about a vertical takeoff. Um, because people will go into their spam folders and pull those suckers out of there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, there was a tense moment where I think a very high level executive call happened between Disney and one of the mailbox providers. But
Yeah.
yes, what I'll say is that certainly is a risk. And if you can avoid spiking like that, it is good. It's a good, it's a good idea to avoid that and plan for it. Um,
Mhm.
but I would say maybe on your opt-in page, have something to say, hey, we're experiencing extreme growth. You might need to check your spam filter for this. So just set that expectation. And
Nice.
then though, if enough people are pulling it out of there, you won't have to worry about that as much.
What I'm hearing you saying is two things as well. One is, a mouse-eared brand is a brand that's very recognizable. There's a huge advantage to that some of us
Yeah.
might not have. And the other thing I'm hearing you say is when you're going from 20K and you're spiking to another 20K, that's one thing. If you're going from a million and you're adding 20K, that's a blip, right? So it really depends on your current situation. Um, so I would
Also,
say yes. Go ahead, LB.
I would actually say also a point on that is going from 20K to 40K is
Mhm.
probably not as hard as going from 100K to 200K in the same period of time
Yeah,
because the
yeah,
larger, just like you said, if you're already doing a million on peak Sundays and you add 20K more, that's nothing. That's a reasonable, that's inside, I think, like a 10% increase. That's not yeah, that's way less than a 10% increase. So that's not bad.
yeah.
But doubling your volume when you're at five figures worth of sends versus six or seven,
Mhm.
That's a very different situation because larger senders, Google and Yahoo and Hotmail, they're extending you more credit. You're like, think of yourself like a borrower. You're borrowing inbox placement from them. The more
Mhm.
they extend you, the bigger a risk you are
Mm.
to their users, to their ecosystems. If you get compromised, etc. And I will also, this will be my shout out to secure your email ecosystem. Make sure all of your critical email logins, your DNS, your email sending platform, etc., are your website, all admin logins, etc., all two-factor authentication secured. Um,
Yeah.
Very important to do that because if a malicious actor gets into a system with email, they're going to have a field day and they're going to tear
Yeah.
you up.
LB, I'm going to pop this link here again. I'm going to let it stick. If you like what you're hearing and you want LB to take a look at your specific sending situation, um, go ahead and fill out this form. We've got 10 slots available. Highly recommend you take advantage of this. We are technically at 45 minutes, but we have more questions. LB, how do you feel about
I
throwing on
got
another 15?
Yeah, let's keep going. But I do have one warning for all you audit people. I don't do every audit in full glam. I'll warn you, I may show up goblin mode, but it's okay. The brain is still the same.
Fair enough. Um, this one just came in. It's about promotions tabs, and we've talked about this before, and so I'm excited to hear you share this. Are there any reliable ways to stay out of the promotions tab, or is it just something we have to embrace?
Yeah, the reliable way to stay out of the promotions tab is to send content your recipients want in their primary tab. Send things that your recipients want to be notified about, and it will happen naturally. And what I'll also tell you is, in general, every sender out there, um, they catch some amount of the primary tab because Google and all the other filters as well. The reason they're so engagement focused and what this allows them to do is also honestly customize the filter down to the level of the individual and
Yeah.
deliver mail how LB wants it, how Joshua wants it, how anybody, how each specific subscriber kind of wants their mail filtered. And so yeah, that's definitely the best way. I mean, is really to lead with a lot of value. What I can tell you is it is generally not profitable to try and game your way into the primary tab. And I know this because my team over at Ty Lopez e-commerce conglomerate accidentally did it once. Typically on Klaviyo, we were sending from a subdomain and a very particular address, but we always had the reply to come back to our parent domain support at
Mhm.
address so that, if
Mhm.
someone had a problem working with a sale, ad or something, they were trying to buy something, they had a problem, they could reach out to support and get help to hopefully increase, our sales and also support our customers.
Yeah.
Um, well, one of the people working on the team accidentally sent from that address, and that was address we used at a pretty high volume, handling support requests. And we sure hit the primary tab that day. And it was honestly one of our single best sales days ever outside of like a Black Friday, Cyber Monday situation. It was
Mhm.
also one of our worst days ever for list churn. We had, I think, about a 2% unsubscribe rate. I think we hit about a 0.5% of complaints.
Yeah.
But yeah, so complaint rate was through the roof because we dinged a bunch of notifications on people's phones. And sure, some people were fine with it. They were looking to buy, couches and accent pillows and things like that day. But there's probably a cohort in there that had already bought a couch and had all the accent pillows they need. So they were annoyed by being alerted about it. So it's really one of those things. And I'll say newsletters in general, a solid newsletter open rate is, I would say, over 40%. I often see, like, when I've worked with some of the top newsletters, I've seen, like even 50% day over day open rates. And that was even before like Apple Mail privacy protection came into play.
Mhm.
You might need to elevate that to like 50 to 60% now. And what I'll say is a lot of newsletters, this happens very naturally. And
Mm.
if it's not, I would, look at your acquisition sources, see if some of that one is performing a lot worse than the others. I would also look at look at your content, take a really hard look at that and say, am I delivering the most relevant and timely content that people actually want to get a notification about? Um, and
Mm,
those, really as long as you dial in the content, because it's absolutely possible for a newsletter to get a fair amount of primary tab. And then you also have to accept there are some people you're never going to hit primary tab for because
yeah.
they check their newsletters when they have time.
Yep.
I tend to be a lot more like that. I get a ton of email. I'm generally not reading, Morning Brew every morning at like
Mhm.
8. I sometimes will, midweek catch up on the last week of emails all at once.
Yeah. Fair. Two more questions. Kind of nerdy ones. With MPP opens, AI opens, and bot clicks from security servers, especially B2B mailboxes, we have lots of experience with those. Um, do you sometimes use stricter segmentation to account for false positives, or is there a better way?
Um, honestly, I don't. I
Mhm.
treat the clicks as I treat the engagement as a sign of life. To be
Yeah.
really honest. And one thing I'll
Yeah.
say is, I don't know that AI is, they may be triggering clicks, they probably won't trigger opens. And bots are very much the same. They will often trigger clicks on the links. They won't always trigger the open tracking pixel, though I've actually seen Microsoft be pretty bad about that. Like, I've seen them, they'll kind of target a domain like with the Eye of Sauron for a period of time, and
Yeah.
then like they will open and click like 95% of the images and links, including the tracking pixel in there. Honestly, I just stayed the course and it cleared up. And it ultimately stabilized to an actually believable, like 30-35% open rate. So I think it depends. You maybe don't want to be knee jerk about it. I would say that single point of data alone is not
Mhm.
enough. I would look at, if I'm getting a ton of bot clicks, let's say from Proofpoint, and I'm getting no opens, that's a pretty
Mhm.
good sign to me. My mail's being filtered, and I probably need to pull back on volume. I probably need to I probably need to check my bounce logs
Mhm.
to see if maybe I'm getting some reputation bounces on if I have one or more IPs. I probably need to check Proofpoint. They don't have a like block list that we can query and put that result in the platform. They unfortunately they have it, well, not unfortunately, but they have it protected by a captcha, so you have to submit it yourself. But I certainly, I generally treat, even Apple Mail privacy, I treat that as a sign of life. On the B2B side, this is not as, generally with Apple Mail privacy, if you're getting those bot opens, and they are the majority of it,
Yeah.
that's a sign you made the inbox, because they don't fire that when you land in spam.
Okay.
For like B2B spam filters like Proofpoint, Mimecast, Barracuda, etc., I think it's kind of just part of the cost of doing business, and I almost just discount it. Or I look at it in concert with other data points like open rate,
Mhm.
and maybe dwell time on the site or something like that, depending on what
Mm.
you're, or if you can track conversion, like actual real conversions, some
Right.
kind of way. That's generally where I tend to, that's a sign to me, at least I need more data. It's generally not a sign to me immediately that I should like dial things back there.
That makes sense. Like a read, skim, glance metric or an actual conversion that you can trace it
Yeah,
back to. Yeah.
that is actually an area where having an advanced tracking pixel that tracks dwell time is very valuable, because
Yeah.
typically the bots aren't going to have a dwell time.
So speaking of pixels, for our last question, this is from, I think, a USG agency.
Mhm.
Um, they said that they've disabled CRM tracking. So they've disabled their pixel tracking, but messages may still be blocked due to security policies. Um, any tips to improve uh, or ensure delivery?
Oh, I gotta admit, delivering into .gov domains, .mil domains, often even .edu domains, that could be incredibly challenging. And I'm not gonna
Yeah.
lie, it also will vary based on what's going on in the world. Like, I think
Yeah.
we all know that at the start of the Iran war, there was a ton of cyber activity. There were a couple of major medical firms that were hacked, and I can guarantee I have a client in the medical industry, and I can tell you we fended off a number of attacks
Interesting.
right at the inception. So I mean, what I'll say is, in any given moment, there not may not be anything you can do. I would certainly say when delivering through government entities, it is very important to make sure that you're sending your brand, your website cybersecurity is very clean. Make sure, you have vulnerability scanning
Hmm.
running. Make sure that, you're patching those, right? Make sure your website security is up to date if you're linking people through. And I would frankly say, make the content when delivering to, government domains, military, etc.
Hmm.
I'd make the content absolutely as lightweight as possible. I probably wouldn't put images in there because frankly, I think they all use some version of probably self-hosted Microsoft.
Hmm.
And like Microsoft, in a lot of cases, it's very easy as an admin to
Hmm.
disable images by default. So I would
Hmm.
just assume they're not going to see them, and even including them might hurt your chances of getting through. Um,
Okay.
and yeah, that's the big thing. Make the content as uncomplicated as possible, and then make sure anything you are any links, domains, etc. I'd say it's super important to make sure only a single domain is represented in that email. Like, the sender domain should be aligned with any link domains
Hmm.
that are in there, and even any redirects. Like, I think a redirect, is probably going to be very challenging. I think a, US government browser is probably going to be locked against that.
Hmm.
So yeah, just assume the cybersecurity requirements are way, 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 way higher, and you just need to make the content, I mean, as just text based and unfancy and
Hmm.
lightweight as possible. Um, and that would be my best advice there. And just make sure your site is super secure. Be monitoring your spam house domain reputation, IP reputation, and pause on sending if you notice a negative signal there, and resolve that before you resume sending to government entities.
One last one.
All right, well, uno más, one more, last one.
This is one for newsletters.
Let's go.
Okay, so we're talking about shared IPs, mail streams, however you want to call it. TBPN is still using Substack on a shared IP. Um, what's the logic of when do I need a dedicated IP? Is a shared IP scalable / maintainable even at scale? What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, so I actually, yeah, shared IP is perfectly maintainable at scale.
Mhm.
Truly just depends on how well the platform that manages that shared IP manages it, right? If they
Mhm.
keep the pool clean, it's no problems. And shared IPs can be a great benefit if you maybe
Mhm.
have an unstable sending cadence. Usually not a problem for newsletter senders, but let's say maybe you send a weekly newsletter, but you also occasionally send urgent alerts, right? I would say, that might be a good use case for a shared IP, because you might not know if you might have just one campaign in a week, or you might have three, and a shared IP with a bunch of other senders on it is your increase in volume is just going to be a wee drop in the bucket. Now, you still
Mm.
have to be concerned about the increase in volume on the domain, because Google cares way more about your domain reputation than they care about your IPs. Like, frankly, as long as your IPs are probably low or better, sending into Google at least, probably not going to have that big of an impact.
Mhm.
Um, I have seen there be an impact when somebody was sending from a high reputation domain, but low reputation shared IP that did actually drag them into spam and was highly problematic. But in that case, we were able to find a workaround, get them on a dedicated IP, and that solved the problem. But shared IPs are great if you have unstable volume, like, or,
Mhm.
highly variable volume. They can be perfectly fine. And also, if you're heavily Google leveraged, as long as they're, like low, medium, or better, I mean, you're not really going to have that much of a problem, if any at all. I will say some providers like Microsoft and Yahoo and AOL can be a bit more sensitive
Mhm.
about the IP. But as long as it's well managed, well policed, well complianced, it's fine. But I've also seen pools of IPs where uh, they were the majority of the traffic coming off of it was black holed, i.e., it never even made it out of the server. It just got deferred
Yeah.
into oblivion. So not every shared pool is created the same. Again, shout out for Spam House. They actually have a tool same way for the domains that you can throw an IP into, and it'll give you those same kind of readouts on the score of whether they think it's associated with malicious activity or not, if they've ever even heard of it, you
Mhm.
know, etc. And you can dig into that and really kind of try to figure out what's going on there.
Amazing, LB. Thank you so much for your time. We're at the hour. Great questions. For those of you
Yeah.
who asked questions and you want to go deeper, please contact us through this form and we'll do an audit with you. For those of you we didn't get to your question, I do apologize. And again, check out LB. We have these 10 slots and we are more than happy to spend the time and make you successful with your email. So again, thanks to everybody who came today. LB, thank you very much for your expertise and your awesome answers and for being here. And with that, thank you all so much. Have a good night. Have a good morning, wherever you are in the world.